The time has come. Bid farewell to your blood-stained past. Forsake the darkness you once embraced, or the light will find no hold. Vanquish the Dark Knight. You and he are one no more.
Thanks a lot, Dad. Because of you, I went from badass Dark Knight to an I can't believe it's not butter spokesman. Greetings, everybody. My name's Tommy the Game Master, and welcome to my channel. Well, today I'm going to be taking a look at Final Fantasy IV. I have both the 3D and the Pixel Perfect Remaster versions, and I've recorded playthroughs of both versions going through Steam. I was originally going to look at which one was better and reward points, but I decided not to do that because which version you want kinda depends on what you're looking for. To me, the 3D version is the one to get, but that's not to say it doesn't have some problems, especially since this was a DS port with just some smoothing filters applied and was then put on mobile and then very lazily ported to Steam. I mean, the controls when playing with the analog stick are just as bad as playing the DS version on the 3DS using the analog slider. And if I was to be honest, the Pixel Perfect version isn't the best 2D version either. It's not a bad version of Final Fantasy IV. It certainly is up there. It's just not the best. As far as my history with this game, Final Fantasy IV was the first 2D Final Fantasy game I played, and I got it because I bought Final Fantasy Chronicles on the PS1 20 years ago. And I got this collection mainly to play Chrono Trigger, not Final Fantasy IV. That said, after I was done playing Chrono Trigger to death, I did try this game out and thought it was okay. While I have also never played the Super Nintendo version, I have several versions of this game on the PSP, DS, Steam, and now this Pixel Perfect version, so I've played a few. However, I want to keep the discussions today mainly focused on Final Fantasy IV 3D and the Pixel Perfect Remaster. Those are the easiest to obtain through Steam or mobile devices. As of this recording, it is going to come to the Switch soon, so talking about these two versions seems to be the most fitting. The story starts off with Cecil, the Dark Knight of Baron and leader of their airship forces, attacking a small mage town of Mysidia and stealing their crystals, while also decreasing their surplus population by quite a bit. But Cecil feels conflicted. The knight who helped raise him and his best friend, Cain, is ordering him to commit atrocities. And I guess I should mention, with Cecil's best friend being named Cain, I'm pretty sure this guy is completely trustworthy, has no jealousy issues whatsoever, and will never betray us. At any rate, Cecil dares to speak up to the king about his objections to what's going on. The king then punishes him by relieving of him his duty and assigning a task to slay a dragon that is blocking the way to the village of Mist, and to deliver a gift of the people of the village. Cain, being the friend he is, agrees to help Cecil go along. However, after killing said dragon, which turns out to be connected to a summoner of the village, which is dead because Cecil killed the dragon, the package they delivered was also a bomb that wipes out most of the village, leaving just a young girl crying over the body of her dead mother. Cain reasons the king wants everyone in this village dead because they have the ability to summon monsters called Eidolons, and comes to the conclusion that this young girl has the power. Cecil defends her, and Cain agrees that they must rebel against the king. But the young girl, upset that the two men who just killed her mother are debating about whether or not she should live, decides to summon Titan and split the ground in two. Cecil is then separated from Cain and has to take care of the young girl. And that's just the opening scenes. As Cecil rebels against Baron, other things happen. he gets involved with an old sage trying to rescue his daughter from being kidnapped by a bard. And of course, the conclusion to that is this game's most infamous line, "You spoony bard." Like most people, I thought the translators were going for the word loony and misspelled it. But spoony is actually a real word that describes the bard Edward to a T. It basically means head over heels in love. With that said, it's not an insult someone would use while beating another person to death. Anyways, he also finds out that Baron is under a new leader named Golbez, who has a thing for creepy Dark Vader-like armor and wants to collect all the world's elemental crystals. And oh yeah, Kain betrays him and kidnaps Cecil's girlfriend, the White Maid Rosa. Cecil gets shipwrecked when he gets on a boat back to Baron to save her, and the boat runs into a monster called Leviathan, and Cecil winds up in Mysidia of all places, where the people are less than eager to see him. But the Elder gives him one chance to climb up to the top of Mount Ordeals to become a paladin, which he does, finds a magic sword, and a strange voice that lends him his power and turns him into a pretty boy beefcake. All I can say, it was the 90s. Fabio was a thing. From there, all sorts of misadventures happen, as Cecil tries, and usually fails, to stop Golbez from getting all the crystals because doing so will let him get to the moon. And yes, you eventually do get to go to the moon and even explore Cecil's whole Earth underworld too. So there's a lot of overworld to explore for a 16-bit game. Yeah, I did skip over only the first couple of hours game story, and for a 16-bit game made over 30 years ago, there is a lot of narrative and a lot of characters. While the game does center around 3 characters, Cecil being the main one, followed by his friend Kain and girlfriend Rosa, most of the other characters get their due and have enough to where they at least have some personality. Not a lot, but some. But compared to what few RPGs were on the NES, this was of epic proportion. Kain has his jealousy issues. Rosa's in love with Cecil, and after playing the damsel in distress twice, she joins the group and is a powerful healer. And Cecil is a noble, kind-hearted bonehead who is trying to repent from his 2 biggest mistakes we see at the beginning of the game. That leads him to protect Rydia, a young girl whose mother he just slain. But the other characters do have some personality and story. Tella, who is a man who is out for revenge after the death of his daughter. Edward the Bard, who is frail and cowardly, but agrees to help Cecil after Baron attacked his kingdom to prevent others from suffering the same fate. Yang, a monk of Fabul, who has a loving but very dysfunctional marriage. Palom and Porum, twin sorcerers from Mysidia, who agree to look after Cecil and keep him out of trouble when he washes back up in Mysidia after that boat wreck. As far as villains go, we have Golbez, who is pretty much your Black Knight evildoer. Whenever he shows up, he's going to cause trouble. He wants to reach the moon, but he doesn't have much of a motive or backstory besides that, at least until you get to the end, but I will avoid spoilers at least for now. However, when I start talking about the 3D differences, I will go into them. His henchmen, he has the 4 elemental fiends, and they're all hit and misses, mostly miss. The last one you fight, Rubiconte, does have a bit of a personality. There's also a few things that the story brings up, but never really delves into. Mainly, what is Cecil's fear of being a Dark Knight? It's obvious why he wants to become a paladin once offered, but he says things, especially in the 3D one, that he and Rosa can't be together because he's a Dark Knight, and others saying it blackens the soul. So is he at risk of becoming a monster or something that's really never delved into? Or what made him choose the blade, especially if the king was an honorable man and his adoptive father? Why would he choose to make his adoptive son become a Dark Knight? A modern day JRPG would have had time to go into this game story and kind of explore these options, This one unfortunately does not have the time to do it, and it kind of brings it up and then hopes you forget it. Again, they're not well written and the characters don't compete with modern day JRPGs. The plot is not in depth compared to other modern day JRPGs. This is not a Tales game, but you do see the grounds of the modern day JRPG story forming. Again, the plot is entertaining and the characters do have some personalities. I should also mention before I go on to the gameplay that Final Fantasy IV is Babylon 5 compared to the original Kingdom Hearts Deep Space Nine. They have a lot of similar game beats when it comes to story, kind-hearted and sometimes a bit dense protagonist, a best friend who gets manipulated and betrays a hero several times, mostly over a girl, an antagonist who is after some magical items so they can enter another realm to get unlimited power, followed by another villain that just pops out of the blue towards the very end of the game. Not saying they're identical, Final Fantasy IV story gets a lot darker than Kingdom Hearts. It's also lacking the Disney location, but there are plenty of similarities to say that Squaresoft copied what was in Final Fantasy IV and then manipulated it into the original Kingdom Hearts story. The story is kind of tied into the gameplay more than any other Final Fantasy game I can think of. I kind of gave you a quick synopsis of the story. It would get boring if I went blow by blow, but know that every dungeon, your party will change. In the original version of the game that the Pixel Perfect is trying to emulate, there is no customization of the characters or choosing jobs. The characters come as is. Leveling up adult Rydia and Rosa can gain you some spells, but the characters keep changing and you have to keep up. One moment you're in a group with a red mage, monk, bard, white mage, and a dark knight. And in the next dungeon, you're dark mage with a white mage and a dark knight. And then you lose the dark knight and gain a paladin that can't use any of the dark knight's dark attacks to damage all enemies, but can learn a few white magic spells and has a lot higher stats. A few dungeons later, you regain the red mage character, but she's grown to be a black mage and a summoner. Characters constantly flip in and out, and this makes grinding for EXP, at least until you get to the end, a bit pointless. No need in topping out someone's stats when there is a good chance after the next dungeon you're going to lose them. There is one unique thing that the game added 30 years ago, although several other Final Fantasy games use it, and that's the Active Time Battle System, or ATB. It's a unique way of putting in some action elements to a turn-based system. In the menu screen, there's a bar that fills up. Once it's filled, your characters can perform an action. If it's a regular attack, they can move right away. If it's a spell, you have to wait longer. In the 3DS, there's another bar that fills up to let you know just how much time you have to wait for that spell to be cast. But I kind of like this system. In a way, it kind of makes the game perfect for a quick run-through. I don't have to grind to get job levels or learn from espers. My level is my level, and that's basically the only thing important. There are a few side quests you can do once you get to the underworld, and ship that can travel over lava that are used to gain some more summons for Rydia, but beyond that, there isn't much to do with the battle system when it comes to customization. If you're someone who is obsessed with customizing your character and stats and learning unique spells, yeah, this game isn't going to be for you, especially the Pixel Perfect remaster. The 3D version does have a few things that you can use to customize your characters a bit, but it's extremely limited. I'll explain later in the review when I get to the comparisons. The dungeons themselves are somewhat similar for the most part. One or two overdo the secret room in the sealed cave, which is the third to last dungeon, and the caves seem to have a few pages out of the Final Fantasy II dungeon handbook with dead-end rooms. Rather than teleporting players in and having them fight, you fight against these fake walls to go inside and find out that sometimes there's nothing in there, But overall, I enjoy the dungeon designs, and there's nothing too convoluted for the time. So let's talk about the differences between the two versions, and I will be going into some plot spoilers for a 30-year-old game, but from here on out, I'll say it like this. I like the 3D one the best, but it might not be for everyone. The graphics for the time on the DS were somewhat good. It does have a PS1 or N64 era feeling, complete with voice-acted cutscenes, and the Steam version has a smoothing filter in place to hide that it was originally meant to be on a small portable screen like the DS. But the 3D graphics haven't aged well, and they can at sometimes be a bit colorless. Also, I think I found out why Baron went down the dark road. There is absolutely no intimacy in this kingdom. There is no way Cecil and Rosa are actually hugging each other or making out with those spikes on their sleeves. They would either impale each other or accidentally slit each other's throat with those spikes coming out of the shoulders of their costumes and uniforms. Anyways, back on track. The two reasons why I like the 3D version is kinda as followed. First, we have fully voice-acted cutscenes that really do expand the story. Cecil getting the sword that makes him a paladin moment is made more doable due to some terrific voice acting all around. You get the person speaking is in pain, and for good reason, and it heightens the scene.
Long have I awaited this, the day that you would come. A tragedy unfolds now, which pains me more than you can know. To end it, I will gift to you my light. Though in so doing, I condemn myself to sorrow greater still.
Basically, the spirit that is granting the ability for Cecil to become a paladin is able to forgive one of his son's mistakes and grant him his power. But doing so, he is probably condemning his other son, who he can't forgive, to death, and making Cecil his instrument in doing so. But Golbez, the other one, has to be stopped. Oh yeah, you find out later that Cecil's father had two sons. One of them in this version is Golbez, who we also find out, like Cain, was enslaved under a spell. But in the 3D one, you get a bit more backstory of the two and what happened to set Golbez on the dark path. I love that. Also, each time a story beat happens, if you open a window, you get thoughts on the situation from the characters as you see Cain struggle, or Cecil's confliction, or that in some cases he can be a dumbass. No, Cecil, Yang's wife did not give you a frying pan so you can cook him breakfast. You're going to be doing something else with it. The second reason I like the 3D version is that it has more than one difficulty level. The easy mode on the 3D version is still one of the harder versions of Final Fantasy IV, but I kind of like that. The bosses are a challenge and you have to put in more strategy to defeat them. For example, take this battle against Golbez that happens once Rydia appears in the party as an adult. You have to have Cecil use Libra to scan Golbez and then have her summon the right monster attack. In the 2D versions I have played, it's basically use any of Rydia's monsters to deliver a beating until he can't move no more. And if you have heard about the DS version's difficulty, for the most part, don't be afraid of that if you play on easy. The 3D Steam version's easy mode is significantly easier and still has the more in-depth boss fights. I only had trouble with Dr. Lugia here and his freaking reverse gas. Yeah, this battle can go to hell. The reverse gas changes what would normally be healing damage to regular damage and vice versa. Interesting concept, but the fact that he can change the conditions on the whim and his healing moves are OP make him a bit more frustrated than he needs to be. But if you're looking for a game that will have Golbez boot up your ass the whole time through, the 3D version also has the hard mode that is equals to the DS version's difficulty. So again, if you're a masochist, you can still have that experience. There's also augments. Once a character leaves the party for good, he'll even augment with his special skills behind, so you can train Rosa to kick or give Cecil black magic. I don't use this too much, but the ability to customize your characters with augments is in there and adds a whole nother level of depth to this game. So, let's talk about Pixel Perfect. Is it perfect? Not really. The problem with Final Fantasy IV, unlike the other Final Fantasy, is that there's just so many versions of it. And each version does something different. For the look, story, and gameplay, the PSP version is better. But since I don't have my PSP ready to take footage right now, you're just going to have to take my word for it. But not only does it have a solid Final Fantasy IV version, but also its sequel's done well on 2D. I haven't played the 3D version of After Years yet, but I will try to play it for review purposes soon, and I hope you appreciate it, because playing through the PSP version of After Years was one of the worst Final Fantasy experience. It's almost as bad as Final Fantasy XIII in my opinion, just a little bit better than Final Fantasy III. But on its own merits, the Pixel Perfect looks colorful enough. The old sprites have gotten a good makeover. They look for the most part authentic, but super cleaned up. My only complaint is Cecil's paladin armor is now gold, which I do believe it was originally white, but that's overall a small complaint. The environments are also very colorful and stand out a bit, especially compared to the bland colors of the 3D version. I still notice a bit of that shimmer when on full screen and decided to play it just on a large window. Gameplay-wise, it's just another 2D version of Final Fantasy IV. I've played, meaning everything but the final boss was super easy and required little to no grinding to get past. You just have to simply learn how to use your team at the moment and their abilities to beat bosses. But other than that, it's pretty simple. Oftentimes you have to use a mage and use whatever magic said boss is weak against, and then have another character heal. Yeah, that and Dr. Luigi, the one that I was moaning about in the 3D version, yeah, he just hits your team with a sleep gas every few turns. Yeah, he takes 2 minutes of your time to beat and you move on to much more threatening foes. There is no customization, and once a character is out of a party, they are gone and they take their abilities with them. Oh yeah, Pixel Perfect has some of the best remasters of the soundtrack. Everything from the overworld to the boss battles sound terrific. I should also give one more point to the Pixel Perfect, that it runs a bit faster and smoother. The game doesn't have as many animations, and it took me about 10 hours to complete it all compared to the 3D version. I guess I should also make another note. Final Fantasy IV Pixel Remaster is for gamers who want their 2D Final Fantasies less censored. You still get the dancing girls in this version, throwing off their dresses when they dance, which was a major no-no to get your game released in North America on a Nintendo system all those years ago. Yeah, because it's possible to get turned on by small pixel sprites. Nintendo really was such prudes back in the day, and no, I'm not going to be turned on by the 3D version either, because those sprites are just plain ugly. So is Final Fantasy IV still worth playing? Yes, just trim down your expectations a little bit. It's still a 30-year-old game, even though the 3D version adds to it. There's still plenty of faults. It's thin on the plot, and some character dynamics are introduced but not really explored. Still, if you're looking for a simple JRPG to get into, then get into this. The two flavors are 2D with good music and simple gameplay, or 3D with decent music, cutscenes, simple gameplay, but with extra options to give it depth. You're not going to go wrong either way, but for my money I would suggest picking up the 3D one. Even if the UI was obviously made for mobile, it just does everything from the story to the gameplay better. Anyways, folks, thanks for listening to this video and this rant. Personally, like I said, choose the 3D one if you're looking for the best one. But the Pixel Perfect is pretty good, and if you're playing on a Switch and want a mobile version of Switch, you could do a lot worse than Final Fantasy IV Pixel Perfect. Anyways, if you guys have any comments, let me know which is your favorite version of Final Fantasy IV down in the comments below.